As fires burn out from yesterday, a wandering mare's found a better way. For just as night seems most dark, the sunrise comes to warm our hearts.
From the ashes of war, through the blood and the gore, a man once more than this world that is torn. A brood that cannot just be stopped or forgot will rise to overcome all odds. And with every new day, through the parts that we play, as we push fear away and remember the ways of a man who was kind, and whose words will remind. Do better.
As fires burn out from yesterday, a wandering mare's found a better way. For just as night seems most dark, the sunrise comes to warm our hearts.
From the ashes of war, through the blood and the gore, a man who wants more than this world that is torn. A brood that cannot just be stopped or forgot will rise to overcome all odds. And with every new day, through the parts that we play, as we push fear away and remember the ways of a man who was kind, and whose words will remind. Do better.
Fall on Equestria, Dead Tree Chapter 7, Hard Lessons in Exploration. The life of the dead is placed in the memory of the living. Marcus Tullius Cicero. We kept walking for hours. The road was more a well-worn path made by hooves, paws, and talons. Buddy was leading the way, while I kept motioning for changes in direction to keep us on the path. Naeruiih kept hovering around to shield me from prying eyes. Any time I forgot to cover up the pip-buck, a zebra hoof would remind me to pull the duster around my right foreleg. He also insisted I kept the helmet on and stayed in the center of the group. Corners was bringing up the rear, while Alguacil stayed flying over us. Any time I started to talk, Alguacil would land and motion for us to be quiet as his eye looked for something. It turned out whatever he was searching for wasn't immediately around us. Naeruiih tensed just before he landed each time. Finally, I just snapped on the 5th time these two showed signs of paranoia.
Can we at least talk and carry on while we walk? The silence is driving me nuts!
I shouted at the top of my lungs, only to have 2 zebra hooves and a griffin rear paw on my mouth.
1, I have no idea how Alguacil got down here that fast. 2, note to self, road dust is not the most tasty thing.
They were stubborn, completely and utterly unwilling to do any talking or something that could make noise. Chifundo and Naeruiih forced me to march along as they all crowded around me, preventing me from moving from the center of the group. With a frustrated sigh, I was marched off with them for hours until finally the bleak wasteland was broken up by a farmstead in the distance. Alguacil flew overhead and landed near us when we approached it.
There's a pony at the well. The buildings look safe to me. Don't see no guns outside. The sun will be setting soon. We should see if we could stay at the farm for the night. No sense in traveling into the knot.
Alguacil advised as we approached together.
How can you see the sun, or know that it's 4:37 p.m. in the afternoon?
I thought, checking my pip-buck. He and Buddy still led the way while Naeruiih and Chifundo walked beside me. I was a little self-conscious realizing that Corners had a good view of our hindquarters. Nothing really to do about it except hope she wasn't just staring at all of us. There were 4 buildings plus the well. 3 were built from scrap metal pieced together from old pieces of vehicles, buildings, and even horseshoes. A 4th structure looked newer. It was made of unpainted lumber. It was easily the first building I'd seen constructed from fresh wood. The building was still ramshackle at best, but the planks looked like they had been cut for the house instead of cobbled together. The house had a picket fence around the backside protecting it from the wasteland. There was a brown cow hump just above the top of the fence. The scrap structures could be described as a very large 2-story metal barn, a small, probably 1 or 2 room storage shed, and some L-shaped building rounding it out that left a space no pony could fit between it and the shed.
A fire might spread around and burn this whole place down.
Lastly, there was a cooking fire with a pot sitting in front of the shed and metal L-shaped building. The fire wasn't lit at the moment, and I couldn't make out what the green stuff in the pot was. The buildings were arranged in such a way that with that fence there were only 2 ways into the compound. One, the way we were walking, large enough for a whole herd of cows to walk through side by side. The other fence was across the courtyard in between the wooden home and the L-shaped metal structure. In the center was a gray and black stone well with a pony sitting against it, his back pressed into the stones that made it up. The pony was a unicorn, a dirty black coat and a pink mane with white highlights. He was certainly a stallion.
Bad, Sunrise. You aren't old enough. That argument doesn't hold weight anymore, does it? You're older than most ghouls in the wasteland. Much less the age of consent, aren't you? Dear goddesses, help me! Am I really having this conversation?
Yes, you are!
As I was thinking, a little pink pony with a fluffy pink mane appeared at the edge of my vision.
Hinky Pie?
Yes, Sunrise, I'm here to, reasons. Anyway, you are having this conversation, and, well, you should probably give it some thought after the chaos.
Chaos? What chaos?
Just like that, the pink pony was silent but had the smile of, "I know something you don't know," written all over her face. Just as I thought that, Pinkie Pie left my vision and I noticed the pip-buck on the unicorn's foreleg. I dashed forward and his eyes went wide as plates. He braced for impact as I slid to a stop. I didn't realize how fast I was going in my excitement, nor did I account for how much I might scare him.
I really hope I have not given you a start. Please be a nice pony. Hi, I'm Wandering Sunrise. Are you okay?
I looked him over. He had several scratches and freshly healing wounds. In addition to that, he was shaking hard enough to break a stone. I tried to give him a reassuring smile to calm him down.
Hi. Just getting some water. You came from out of nowhere.
The stallion replied with his teeth chattering.
Wow, talk about nervous. Oh no, please let me do this without panicking him.
I heard the familiar sounds of hooves, talons, and paws coming up behind me. I looked over my shoulder to see the zebras and alguacil looming over him.
You live on this farm?
The griffin asked as his one eye glared.
Do you mind if we stay the night until tomorrow's daylight?
Chifundo fired off without thinking. Naeruiih allowed a huff and a snort.
Well, howdy there, partner. I'd like to know if we can fix some dinner here soon.
Buddy smiled and waved his hand over his head.
Okay, you four do realize that this pony is supremely nervous and suddenly crowding him is going to get us the worst possible reaction? I mean, seriously, can we give him some space?
I wanted to scream at them to be nicer and less presumptuous. I wanted to make them all back off and let me do something on my own.
You are older than them. Use your Philly seniority.
Pinky's high-pitched shriek pierced my mind. The unicorn stood up to his hooves and jumped into the well.
Wait, what? Did he just...
Good luck! I hope you live!
The stallion shouted as he disappeared into the well.
I got you. You aren't?
Naeruiih was right on his heels, leaping into the well when we heard a gunshot and blood sprayed out from Naeruiih's flank, hitting right across my helmet visor. The gunshot had come from the house beyond the well. 5 ponies had emerged from the buildings while we had been speaking. My eyes locked onto the one that had shot Naeruiih's flank with a smoking varmint rifle. They wore that strange raider barding I'd seen back at the walls of Silverfang's shanty. The same kind of barding that Alguacil had told me to never wear or he'd shoot me. We had walked right into an ambush. I dove for cover behind the one place within reach, the stone well. 2 stallions had gone tumbling down from the hail of fire between both sides. As soon as I felt cold stones on my flank, my head peeked over the cover and hit Sats to get a good view of what was going on. I had no weapon out, but Sats would buy me time to observe. 2 raiders peered over the fence, using the wood as a cover with rifles. I recognized them as rifles straight out of an old recruitment poster. They were standard equestrian military service rifles, cheap and effective. 2 more raiders stood outside the house, one with a pool cue and the other with a scoped varmint rifle held in their mouths. The 5th was coming from the L-shaped building with a nasty-looking double-barrel shotgun. This one was a unicorn using telekinesis to hover the weapon above her head. She was a sickly green, not the bright emerald I was. She also wasn't wearing a helmet like the others for some reason. I could clearly see the all-black mane and scarred cheek before I noticed there was a 3rd barrel on the bottom of the caravan shotgun.
A grenade launcher?
The others had taken the same idea as I looked around scrolling between possible targets. Alguacil and Chifundo had taken cover with me. Buddy was starting to move forward towards the farmhouse. I could see the rear legs and taut
Bad sunrise.
rump of Naeruiih going into the well. One quick glance showed the big farm building had no targets, but several gray dots were on my EFS inside. Another look to my right to confirm no one was coming out of the small metal shed. My EFS also registered nothing in that direction. All total, I found 5 green, 5 red, and 8 gray dots on my EFS. 5 green were my friends, 5 red had guns pointed at us, and 8 gray I couldn't see. I hoped this thing was as accurate as Stable-Tec claimed. Naeruiih disappeared into the well after the jet black stallion as soon as I released Sats.
What do I do? What do I do?
My panicked mind raced as rounds from the service rifle bounced off the well. My tail offered up one of the apple-on-a-stick grenades we had bought yesterday. The steel stem twitched and wiggled in the air while I took it in my mouth.
How do you always have a good suggestion?
Without thinking further about it, I pulled the pin and my tail threw it into the farmhouse. My tail pointed me at the metal shed and I started running for it. I could see the door on the other side of a large slate rock, and it was currently the only hope of having cover from all directions. I bolted into the shed. A heavy thunk came in reply to my grenade from the direction of the raiders. The green unicorn had launched a grenade and was putting another into the launcher. I felt the heat and shrapnel press into my backside. The force of the blast propelled me into the shed even faster as my duster and stable barding armor was pelted with debris and shrapnel. My hooves hit the ground once to dart around a set of rocks large enough to be a griffin. I got into the door and a second thunk echoed over the sound of shouting and rifle fire. I looked back to see another explosion where I had been, all of my friends caught in the blast.
Oh, goddesses, no! Please, no!
The rifle fire was silenced by the explosion.
Just like that? They're gone? Without a word or even a whisper?
All I could do now was stare outside the shed door as dust completely obscured the spot where Chifundo, Alguacil, and Buddy had been standing.
Please, don't be dead. You can't all be dead. No, not just like that. I need you, please. My Celestia herself, please.
I said a prayer to Celestia and Luna, hoping it would be answered. The defiant roar of a magnum revolver blew the smoke away and shattered the silence. For a brief moment, the outline of Alguacil was illuminated through the dust by a flash of gunpowder. Then his revolver was silenced by a much louder explosion. My eyes went to the farmhouse where my grenade had been thrown. The shadows of the true raiders inside the farmhouse were lit up through the doorway, their bodies tossed away by the explosion like dolls thrown by an angry child. A pool cue suddenly slammed through the wall of the wooden building, charred with ash and covered in blood. A single hoof fell into the doorway, belonging to the pony whom had been holding said cue.
If that pool cue is there, and his hoof is there, that would put his neck... Oh, that is through his neck, isn't it? Did I just kill a pony?
I heard another varmint rifle firing, this one crisper and without the sound of a rusted bolt moving. Chifundo emerged from the dust, using the well to steady himself. His leather barding had stopped most of the shrapnel, but he did have cuts on his face and down his neck. Chifundo wasn't letting his injuries stop him from shooting at the ponies behind the fence, however. A blur that was in the shape of a sand dog dashed through the remaining smoke and dust. Buddy sprinted at a speed I couldn't believe was possible, crossing the farmyard in fractions of a second. He ran into the L-shaped building, and I noticed the unicorn was no longer in the door. There was a shotgun blast that pelted him with buckshot in the doorway. Buddy did not even slow down. The mighty sand dog was completely unfazed by the pellets.
Sunrise, you can clearly see these ponies are trying to murder you and your friends. You just ran into a building that probably has more of them in it. You haven't even checked yet.
Sweat formed on my brow as more fear crept into my mind. This was different from the fear of losing something. It was mortal peril. This kind of dread was because there's a pony right behind you right now with a machete ready to cut your head off. I spun around and had my shotgun out in a flash. A bead of sweat fell across my brow as my tail held the shotgun up, wrapped around the pump action. The bit had the taste of leather and salt on my tongue as I panted for air. My eyes darted around wildly, searching for the slightest hint of movement. No one was there. I started into the building, turning on my pip-buck light. The room had several chemistry sets boiling away with colors of blue, red, and green liquids. It smelled awful as I inhaled the stale air.
That smell. Where was that coming from? It's so rotten. There are 4 counters built into the walls, and... Is that a still? Are they making alcohol?
One of the counters was an island in the center, which was right at my head height. Unless some pony was ducked down behind it, it was clear. Slowly, I started making my way around the island in the center when I heard the roar of rapid bullet fire. I dropped to my belly and looked around as the series of shots rang out in 2 short bursts.
What in Luna's shadow was that? Did some pony have a machine gun? Or a cannon?
I rose back up and rounded the island to discover the smell. A pile of pony skeletons stacked nearly as tall as I was, bleached by the sun and elements. The skeletons were not the worst part. Those bones were underneath the corpse of a fresh pony. The poor pony had been killed by a gunshot to the head. He had his body sliced up by clean-cut butcher's knives like the pieces of flesh for serving carnivores at a restaurant. His back was laid onto the skeletons, and I could see he was missing his stallion hood as well with a bloody stump. My shotgun clattered to the steel plates of the floor while I screamed like a filly scout in front of a spider.
Ah! This was just some random pony. Oh, dear goddesses, are those maggots in their eye? Those are maggots! What in all the hells of the sun and moon? Are those butcher marks? Are they eating ponies? This can't be real!
This is the wasteland, Sunrise. This is the world you woke up to. What are you going to do? Lying here shaking seems to be not helping.
Pink finished my thoughts. I covered my eyes and started to pray that Pinky was wrong and this was all just a bad dream. When a hoof touched my mane, I jumped up, spinning towards the direction of the hoof and clutched my shotgun. Chifundo's pink stripes and soft stallion smile greeted me. He had his hoof pressed against the barrel of my shotgun to keep it pointed at the ground. He was covered in scratches, bruises, and cuts everywhere his barding didn't cover. A piece of shrapnel embedded into his neck like a sewing needle halfway through a fabric strip.
It's my fault you have that wound.
Sunrise, you give us your persistence. Our friends require our assistance.
I was trembling worse than a water tower in an earthquake as I followed Chifundo outside. He ran behind the rocks I had avoided getting in here. I looked to see one pony still up on the fence, who then fired their service rifle a few more times in our direction. I jumped to the rock as 5.56mm death riddled the shack door we just came from. The machine guns roared again, and this time I knew where it was coming from. The metal box that contained corners had 2 barrels flashing like a rave poking out on each of her eye slits. They blazed away at the picket fence where the raider who had just fired at me was.
She must have replaced the shotguns.
In slow motion, bullets stormed into the body of the stallion. His unicorn horn shattered under the barrage as his body spewed out a fountain of blood. He painted the fade-brown fence with his crimson remains. The entire scene looked like brown Swiss cheese covered in the gore of the dead. As the machine guns died, there was another shotgun blast, this one extremely loud from inside the L-shaped building. Then the battlefield grew quiet with the echo of the shotgun ringing out from inside the metal structure. Something in my gut churned and I pushed it aside. Alguacil moved towards the L-shaped building that Buddy had gone into, and Chifundo bolted back to the well. He was helping Naeruiih out of the well along with a now unmoving black stallion. His chest was moving and his nose twitched, so Naeruiih hadn't killed him. I moved to the corner of the L building away from the door.
You failed once. You aren't going to fail again. You will not just flee from your friends, Sunrise.
My hooves were shaking and I felt myself wanting to hyperventilate again. I could still see the partially butchered, decaying body back in the shed. I had to shake my head loose in order to break the vivid imagination away.
They did that to a pony. You have to make sure they aren't going to do it to any pony else.
A pool of blood was spreading out from under the door drapes. There was a creeping silence coming from a building, accompanied by the pounding of my heart. Alguacil's razor focus was completely on the door. Every bit of his stance screamed violence, waiting to be released with the slightest hint of movement.
This is very bad, Choo-Choo.
Chifundo kept repeating from his position at the well. He was loud enough we could hear, and he wasn't rhyming either, just like in the incomplete stable. My skin crawled at him doing this, and I wanted to tell him to be quiet.
Where was Buddy? Why didn't we just go in?
The Green Raider unicorn jumped into the doorway. The black maned mare's shotgun levitated as it pointed at my face. A red dot moved into view on the HUD from EFS.
Why didn't I just pay attention to the ice-forward sparkle? It is there to save you from this.
I stepped into Sats, slowing down time so I could think. I watched the motion of the caravan shotgun slowly rolling into position to be pointed towards my head.
You don't have to kill her. Just disarm the mare.
I forced Sats up hard away from the center mass shot it wanted. I aimed past her head and horn of the unicorn. I ignored her physical self completely. I went up to aim at the shotgun with my own buckshot cannon. The one shot would completely consume the Sats spell. I'd only get one shot, and I doubted that the Raider mare was going anywhere less than lethal back at me.
I have to give her a chance. I have to be the better pony. There is no way she's that suicidal.
I released Sats. The like-new 12-gauge rechambered gun roared to life for the first time, with a deeper, harder boom than my ears were ever prepared for. If not for the specialized stock and the grip being custom-made for me, I would have been driven onto my haunches or even sent flying. The buckshot slammed into the double barrel and sent it flying with the same smash of a sledgehammer into the building behind her. Alguacil reacted a second later, pouring 2 shots from his revolver. They tore into the mare's shoulder through her barding, spitting blood from the holes.
Give up! It's over!
I declared, only to have the mare charge at me. Her horn lowered as she slammed herself into me at full speed. Her eyes were wide and wild, shaking me to the core as I caught a glimpse of total insanity. I felt both of her 4 hooves and horns smash against my armor plates. The next thing I knew was a brief trip through the air and a slam into the wall next to me. My breath, driven from my lungs and my shotgun, clattered across the ground into the unlit cooking fire, ringing against the pot.
Lotus Wrath! She hits like a freight train!
I could feel the bruises, but metal plates were harder than unicorn horns. The mad mare hadn't managed to pierce my armor. My bones ached from the impact and my legs refused to answer the call to move. Before I could get up, a hoof grabbed me by the collar and hefted me up. I wanted to thank whoever helped me up, but instead of having a chance to speak, I felt the slam of steel into my visor face. The impact of the iron shoes slamming into my head 3 times before the security helmet finally flew off. I could hear gunshots, and each time my vision had cleared just enough to be greeted with the sickly green-colored unicorn pounding into my faceplate. Her barding was penetrated by shot after shot, but she was ignoring it. A punch threw my helmet off. With the visor clear of my head, I could see her eyes. They were pinpricks.
Drugs? She is so high and frenzied, she doesn't know anything except rage.
The hoof raised in slow motion, ready to bash my face in. I started to see my life flash before my eyes with those iron horseshoes ready to drill it in. She didn't get to finish the motion. Her forehead exploded, showering me in brains and blood. I fell to the ground in a heap, stunned. My eyes were burning with her blood in them while the mare's body fell on top of me. I scrambled to get out from under the body. My hooves kicked and slacked hard against packed dirt. The flowing river of blood coming out of the raider's bullet-riddled body ran over my armor and hooves. My panicked 4 hooves wiped frantically, only making my vision burn more. I was desperate to get the irritation from my eyes and face. The irritation of having another pony's blood flow into my eyes and over my cheeks like tears of a broken mother.
3 days, and I've been covered in some pony's brains all over my face. Twice!
I felt the weight lifted off me as I looked up to see Chifundo standing over me. He was holding the corpse with one hoof, his other hoof extended to offer to help me up. Very sheepishly, I took the hoof and pulled myself from under the dead unicorn. My tail collected my helmet and I shoved it back on while putting my shotgun into its holster. Chifundo approached me as I heard a dragging noise across the dirt when Corners joined us.
Come along. There is work to do, Sunrise. We have to look at the one who gave us the surprise.
Chifundo spoke, leading me towards the well. I wanted to look at the dragging noise, but Chifundo had his hoof around my shoulder and was keeping my head facing forward back to the well.
Oh, look! Old Yeller.
Corners blurted out with a high-pitched Philly laugh.
Don't look, Sunrise! The surprise isn't ready yet! And you wouldn't want to spoil the surprise party, would you?
Where did this pink pony come from, and why was it in my head?
Pink was in my view, staring at me expectantly.
I don't guess I do want to ruin the party.
I grumbled as Chifundo gave me a questioning look. Pinky jumped with glee. Chifundo stashed me next to Naeruiih, who was working on repairing the eye socket of the black stallion. It looked like his eye might have been popped out with how Naeruiih was moving his hooves.
What the buck? Naeruiih, how much damage did you do to him?
Sugar Cube! If I ever hear you do anything like that again, I'll consider you a raider or a pony who's been twigged. Either way, I will personally put you down and claim the bounty. Do I make myself clear?
Alguacil wailed, and then there was a shot of his pistol.
The next one won't miss. Now get out of my sight.
I started to look over at the commotion when Chifundo forced my head back to Naeruiih and the unconscious unicorn. I wanted to ask Naeruiih how he had hit him. I knew how much damage Naeruiih could do with those hooves from the ghouls and mole rats. Just what type of acrobatics could the zebra perform while doing it? Had he really hauled the unicorn up a well alone after beating him unconscious, all in such a small space? I looked up at him with an expression of "let me help" written across my face.
Sunrise, see if you can wake him up gently. Do you have any extra bandages?
Naeruiih started to growl as Corners and Chifundo crowded around.
The rest of you go check the building we haven't been into and stop crowding my patient.
I had never seen Corners nor Chifundo move that quickly. I had enough sense to know how to help at least. I flipped on my pip-buck light for Naeruiih and then looked at the pip-buck on his arm.
I can't really wake him up if you're working on him, but I can check his pip-buck to see what's on it.
I moved to where my light could shine over as much of his injuries as possible while plugging in the extension connector to his pip-buck. It was offline, the spell matrix needed to be reset. It took a few tries to get it to boot up, but once I did, I had full access to everything, which, as it turned out, was almost nothing. I could see his status and name, Colt Chaser. That was it. There were no files, no logs, nothing. This thing had been wiped.
You only get this much of a wipe if you were to use a magnet. Someone intentionally took a magnet against the drive and used it to wipe the spell memory matrix clean. Why would you do that? You could ruin the pip-buck if you got that too close to the operating unit.
I tried a file recovery as I noticed that Naeruiih had stopped working and was just waiting for his efforts to take effect.
Sunrise, keep him covered.
Naeruiih declared and looked over my shoulder to behind me.
Anything?
There are some ponies in cages inside. I believe we should change their fortune's tide.
Chifundo called back from the barn door. I pulled out Alguacil's old...
No. It's my revolver now. It was Buddy's gift to me.
I fought my tears back, trying desperately to hold myself together. Slowly and unwillingly, I placed its barrel against the black stallion's head and hoped that would satisfy Naeruiih. I didn't cock it or release the safety. I just put it there as a vacant threat.
See if you can find the keys. Also, this unicorn is wearing an inhibitor ring. Find the key for it, too. Not sure if I want to break his horn yet or not.
Naeruiih started to search through the bodies of the fallen.
Break his horn? You just fixed him up! Now you're having me point a gun at his head and are talking about breaking him again?
I stayed there as my friends were busy with searching the dead raiders. I could hear the sound of a shovel working somewhere on the other side of the well. Every time I started to peek up around the stones, the pink pony in my mind would tell me,
"No, you'll ruin the surprise!"
in the cheeriest, sweetest voice I had ever heard. Soon there was a group of ponies walking out of the metal barn being led by Chifundo and Corners. They looked like the most ragged group I'd ever seen. All came with 1,000-yard stares. They were filthy, so bad in a couple cases I couldn't tell where their coats started and the dirt ended. They had wounds, both festering and fresh, all over them, as well as old, badly healed marks on each and every pony. They shuffled their feet through the dirt, barely lifting their hooves. Each of them hung their heads low into the dust and groaned as they moved. They looked like soulless husks compared to the sharp-eyed, purposeful movements of my friends. It was a show of horrors that only a contempt or outright hatred of life and anything sacred could achieve. I felt pure vitriol for the ponies we had just fought, the ones I'd even grenaded. They deserved it. And then I felt sorry for them. Whatever had happened to them to lead them to do these things must have been even more horrific.
Yet here they are, so broken that they're setting up to repeat the cycle.
Alguacil walked beside me, his talons covered in dirt and sombrero covering his face.
Buddy is taken care of.
I looked up at him.
Where is he? Is he all right?
I tried to convey as much hope as possible in my words.
Was this the surprise? Had Buddy found something amazing? Or was the inside of that metal building just bigger than it looked?
Sunrise, he's dead. I buried him along with the other farm ponies behind the house.
He coldly snapped off. I finally paid attention to my EFS. 4 green dots, 6 gray, no red. Right then and there, my world came crashing down. I dropped the revolver into the dirt, and I felt my hooves give out. Air drove from my lungs with my belly's impact into the ground.
This is your fault. If you hadn't panicked, you would have moved to back him up. Wait, how? How did he die? What? How did he?
I started as my mouth moved and the rest of my body didn't. I could feel the tears in my eyes welling up and rolling down my cheeks.
The shotgun caught him in the head. It wasn't pretty, but it was quick, Sunrise.
Alguacil kept his hat over his face, hiding what he was feeling and keeping his voice flat and emotionless. In a strange way, it was his way of paying respect. As far as I could tell, that was his method. Chifundo walked past us toward the farmhouse. I dragged myself over to the unicorn and laid down next to him, putting my head between my hooves and just sobbing.
I'm pathetic. This wasteland is going to get me killed, along with every pony else.
I heard a groan and remembered the unconscious pony next to me. The stallion started to move, lifting his head. Suddenly, guns were trained on him from Alguacil and corners, while Naeruiih had him by the throat with his hoof.
Give us one good reason we shouldn't bash your skull in.
Naeruiih's threat was terrifying even to me. The rage in his eyes indicated he was moments from executing it too.
Please! Please don't! I was just doing what they asked! They said if I did that, they wouldn't hurt the others!
He blurted out, averting his gaze away from every pony. This full-size stallion was sounding as pathetic as I felt.
They just used whichever one of us looked the most helpless. Please! I don't remember anything else!
I say we smash his horn off right now. Go on, Alguacil. Shoot it.
Naeruiih declared as I heard the click of a revolver's hammer.
The first surprise is now!
Pink demanded and shoved me forward, somehow. I simply reacted. I pushed the stallion's head down and knocked Naeruiih clear of his throat. I moved so fast I felt like I was going at Naeruiih's speed. Even I was surprised by what I was doing. A magnum revolver was now pointed at my head along with a pair of machine guns. Alguacil's eyes went wide and he quickly moved his gun to not be pointing at my head. Naeruiih took a step back, stunned at my speed and ferocity.
Enough! No more killing today! I don't care if he really was working with them or just protecting those ponies! No more!
I screamed out at the top of my lungs. Every pony had their eyes on me as I pulled out my shotgun and pointed it around. I pointed the buckshot cannon at my friends. Tears streamed down my cheeks and my voice cracked with every word. I gritted my teeth and growled as best I could through the emotional wreck of my mind. I pumped my shotgun to get a fresh shell into the chamber as the spent round from earlier bounced off the ground. My mouth released the bit long enough to speak.
Anyone who wants to hurt this unicorn is going to be shot by me!
Level up status. Level 4 achieved. New perk. Fixed it. Earth pony only. You can take any item, and with a copy of itself, improve it, granting in addition +2 DT, +2 damage, or +5 to any skill, so long as the item is armor or clothing. Use of this perk requires a repair check, and you destroy one of the items in the process. The player decides which is destroyed, whether you fail or succeed. You can turn armor into overpowered artifacts. Not that any engineer will understand how the hell they work.
But not from how far. Our journey so ruthless, I still bear the scars. And what matters ain't that the world saw its end, but what kind of life we will spend.
I'm trying to be better, but still miss the mark. And each time I save you, I'm left in the dark. No,
when you're in trouble, I'll be by your side. My love for you ain't gonna hide. Inside the fire keeps burning.
Still death is calling. The rivers run dry neath a blackened out sky, and all the dead trees are falling. Creatures we face will see equal judgment, our mercy or grace. Decision is needed for those who survive of whether you'll be left alive.
And all bloody work for a hope that we hold of past golden age and its story still told. And what sacred virtues we're able to heed to bring back to those who are in need.
The future